Hey, church family. Good morning on this lovely Thursday. Um, it's interesting this year of 2020. I'm sure none of you have expected this year to turn out this way. Lots of events going on that I'm sure, none of us were expecting, and we're only halfway through this year. So it's been pretty interesting. But I want to share with you today from Acts chapter 7. And Acts chapter 7 is basically about Stephen sharing the gospel. So, Stephen, who was a disciple, he was proclaiming Jesus to uh, the Pharisees, the ruling Jews at the time, who didn't believe in Jesus. So, he was sharing the gospel. He went through a long speech at his trial, and then once he was done, he basically said that you guys don't understand, you don't get it, but Jesus is the Son of God. This is who you should be believing in. And so they basically cried blasphemy and sentenced him to death, and they stoned him to death. Now, I want to share with you how two ways how God uses this event to spread the gospel. So after the stoning of Stephen in Jerusalem, so because of that, the people of God then were afraid and they scattered. So they ended up scattering and they go to different parts of the land. So God uses this moment to spread His word, spread His gospel through this event. So He's able to spread the gospel by striking fear into those around him. And those people and his people scatter and share. And also in that instance, it's really interesting because in that scattering, just like how we're kind of scattered now, where we don't get to per se. Some of us, or most of us as Christians, aren't able to worship in our house of worship, just like in their original house of worship. Even though they didn't have a church building per se, but they weren't able to worship because of circumstances. And our circumstances, we're not able to meet in our church building either. But I think through all of these events, we are able to share the gospel with those that we probably would not be able to do so, whether it's online because we can't meet in a house of worship, or just neighbors and friends that you may not have seen otherwise. And it's interesting to be able to share that and see how God is still using, even though we're not in a church building, how we're able to still share the gospel and share Jesus Christ with those around us. Now, the other thing I want to share is let's take a look at Saul, who was one of the persecutors. And I just want to share that only true life change can come through Jesus Christ. So, Saul was one of the people that kind of approved the execution of Stephen. And so he's going about his business persecuting the rest of Christians, trying to jail them, beat them, or murder them, and all those things. And so he's on his way and he meets Jesus on the road. And so because he meets Jesus, his life changes. And so his life changes, and now no longer is he persecuting Christian, but he becomes a Christian. And he is one of he becomes his name gets changed to Paul, and he becomes one of the great writers of the Christian Bible. And one of the biggest advocates for Jesus Christ. So we can see two things in those events. We can see because of Stephen's death, the spreading of the gospel, and then because of life change, how Saul's life changed. His name was changed to Paul, and how Paul became a great advocate for Jesus Christ. Now, one last thing I want to share with you is how we can also share that life change with those around us, and it comes from Mark, and it says it has Jesus, and he's talking to those around him, and it says in Mark chapter 12, verse 28, it says, "And one of the scribes came up and heard them disputing with one another, and seeing that he answered them well, asked him, 'Which commandment is the most important of all?' Jesus answered, 'The most important is, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength. The second is this: You shall love your neighbor as yourself. There is no other commandment greater than these. Now, with all that's going around, I think definitely we should always remember the Lord our God is one, and we always trust in God. But I think sometimes we don't think about that second one as much, is that the love your neighbor as yourself. Now, if we truly want to affect things around us, if we truly want to show the love of Jesus Christ, and we truly want people to come to Christ, then we need to live out this one. And that's is to love your neighbor as yourself. And I think that would be awesome to do, and it's definitely something that I will be striving to do as well. So thank you, church family. I hope this was a great encouragement to you, and just remember to love your neighbor as yourself.